Hey everybody, this is Mike. One of the new trends within healthcare is paying for value-based care. And the Deloitte Healthcare Currents this week was describing some of the new programs that are being tested in Michigan, and I thought they were really interesting and important. They described, for example, a diabetes prevention program that the goal was to prevent the onset of type 2 diabetes. And so they set as a target that the people within this county would lose weight and exercise. And these are overweight, sedentary people who are at risk for developing type 2 diabetes. They use an interesting funding model. They have private investors provide the startup money, the seed money, and then if they meet their goals and objectives, then nonprofits and government agencies will pay off the private investors. My problem with this, and I think this is important, the goal of the program is to prevent type 2 diabetes. And the benchmarks that they set are something else. And they're good, weight loss and exercise, that's good, that's fine. But if you have a program that is designed to prevent type 2 diabetes and you're paying for value, then the benchmark ought to be that you prevent diabetes, that the incidence of diabetes in the next year, say, goes down, okay? So that's a higher threshold, but I think that's important if we're going to realize the benefits. They felt like it worked in this county in Michigan, and so they're going to extend it to, I think it's 8 other counties. They've used this previously with preventing prenatal problems and having healthy babies born within Michigan. But again, there were these intermediate indicators, proxy indicators of success of, that they moms went and got their prenatal care, did what they were supposed to, follow directions, etc. If you're going to pay for value-based care, then it seems like you ought to pay them for reducing, for generating healthy babies, for the percentage of healthy babies born. Very interesting case came across my desk as described in JAMA Surgery from the Washington State Supreme Court. And it has to do with Intuitive Incorporated. And they make the Da Vinci surgical operating robot. And so this is probably the latest and greatest breakthrough technology within the surgical area. And you can see up at the top right that the surgeon sits away from the patient using a robot to actually touch the patient and manipulate tissue. And the case involves a board-certified, competent urologist who was removing a prostate cancer in a patient. Now, the surgeon had gone to Intuitive for a day-long training after his hospital bought one of these operating robots. He spent the day at Intuitive, learned how to use the system. Intuitive warned the surgeon as he was leaving that he ought to do 2 more cases that would be proctored by a surgeon who was comfortable and experienced with the Da Vinci surgical robot. And he didn't do that. And he just went on and started operating, and the first patient he operated on had some complications and some problems. And so the case was litigated in the lower courts, and they found that the surgeon was at fault, but they appealed, and the Washington State Supreme Court found that the hospital, and here's the kicker, Da Vinci, or rather Intuitive Incorporated, had responsibility for how their medical device was used, which is new ground, okay? And specifically, the Intuitive Incorporated did not warn the hospital credentialing committee about this need for subsequent proctored surgeries. So there were other problems in this case. For example, the credentialing committee has Intuitive consultants on the committee giving approval. So they would have a conflict of interest. One of the things, and this was not part of the surgical case, but this is a very, very low bar. When you look at the data about when do you maximize the benefits of using this technology, when do you maximize the proficiency of surgeons, you're talking over 100 cases. Some studies have found it's 200 cases. So usually people kind of pick around 150 as being the threshold for when you kind of max out your proficiency with using a new technology like a Da Vinci operating robot. So this threshold that you have to spend a day at Intuitive and then 2 proctored cases is a very, very low bar. The other issue that we get into with these devices, and again, this is not part of the case, but you have a robot. The data has shown that when you're operating on prostate cancer, the robots get better surgical margins, less blood loss, etc. And there is data showing that I've seen that shows, for example, when you use it with hysterectomies, you have less blood loss. The data is mixed on a lot of other procedures. And so how do you extend this? Do you let surgeons go ahead and try this once they have some experience with new procedures? Do you demand that there be data showing that these surgical robots have benefits before you allow surgeons to start using them with other procedures? Very, very difficult issue. And similar to this, Sachs et al. Had the story editorialized in the New England Journal of Medicine about solanezumab, which is a monoclonal antibody technology for amyloid plaque. It actually removes amyloid plaque in the brains of demented patients. So the idea is that amyloid plaque is correlated with Alzheimer's disease, and the theory is that if you clean up the amyloid plaque, these patients will not deteriorate into a full dementia. And this links to the right to try laws. And so this is a position advocated very strongly, for example, by the Wall Street Journal. They argue, for example, if you have terminal cancer, you have the right under the liberty in our country to go ahead and try it. The role of the FDA, they argue, should be to just prove that these pharmaceutical products are safe. And it ought to be the right of the people to try, and over time they will demonstrate the effectiveness. And so these authors were pointing out that the story of solanezumab informs this discussion, that this story illustrates the benefits of FDA approval, showing that these compounds are safe and effective. Solanezumab was studied extensively all the way through phase 1 and 2 and then 3 trials. They ended up with 3 pivotal phase 3 trials. They called them Expedition 1, Expedition 2, and Expedition 3. Expedition 1 and 2 failed to show any benefit of solanezumab, but within their statistical analysis plan, before they ran the trial, they planned a subgroup analysis. Yes, there are all kinds of problems with subgroup analysis, but this was prospectively built into the design of the study, so it should be okay. And they found a subgroup benefit. Even though overall there was no benefit of solanezumab, they found a subgroup benefit with mildly demented patients. Again, pre-planned comparison. It was only on a 90-point scale. This benefit was almost 2 points on a 90-point scale. So after consulting with the FDA, the pharmaceutical company decided to proceed with Expedition 3. Now, under the 21st Century Cures Act, the editorialists argue, the FDA might well have released solanezumab for mildly demented Alzheimer's patients based on these, based on Expedition 1 and Expedition 2. But because FDA is operating under current provisions of safe and effective, they said, no, you need another pivotal trial focusing only on mildly demented patients. Make that the focus of the entire study. Now remember we're talking years of study. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. They didn't say, I would guess, $30 to $40 million to run a trial like this would be typical. So they ran Expedition 3, and it showed no benefit. Okay? So the authors are pointing out, under 21st century, we might have released this. What would it, we don't really know. What would it have taken? 5 years? Look at the amount of patients or the amount of money that we saved in the false hope of these patients. Now they're saying, what if we price solanezumab like the other similar monoclonal antibody technologies, which run, $10,000 to $20,000 per year? Look at all the tens of billions of dollars of savings that we saved our healthcare system by insisting that this company run Expedition 3. So interesting data point about this right to try debate. All kinds of interesting things going on. I hope you have a great week.